Gospel of Judas, forbidden writings of the betrayer. The Gospel of Judas, one of the most controversial apocryphal texts of early Christianity, has stirred passionate debates among historians, theologians, and laypeople ever since its rediscovery in the 20th century. This text, which diverges from the traditional biblical narrative, portrays Judas Iscariot not as a traitor, but as the chosen disciple who acted on the direct command of Jesus Christ. Its message challenges established notions of betrayal, sacrifice, and redemption, opening up a new and thought-provoking perspective on the spiritual and ethical foundations of Christian faith and their historical development. Interested in learning more? Then sit back and discover the Gospel of Judas, a text that may fundamentally change the understanding of the beginnings of Christianity and of Judas's role in the story of Jesus' salvation of humanity. The Gospel of Judas is one of the most fascinating yet controversial non-canonical writings of early Christianity. It is not part of the Bible, but a Gnostic text that dramatically alters the perception of Judas Iscariot. The author of this Gospel is an unknown Gnostic writer, not Judas Iscariot himself. And the text bears his name because it focuses on Judas's role in the story of Jesus' crucifixion, though it was not written by his own hand. The title is therefore literary rather than historical. The text takes the form of a dialogue between Jesus and his disciples, particularly with Judas, and depicts the events around the betrayal in a completely different light than the New Testament presents. According to this gospel, Judas was not a betrayer, but Jesus' most faithful disciple, who simply carried out his command, handing Jesus over to the Romans as part of a higher spiritual plan. The text interprets Jesus' death not as a tragedy, but as a necessary step to liberate his divine essence from the body, reflecting the Gnostic emphasis on the dualism of spirit and matter. The surviving version of the Gospel is in Coptic and forms part of the so-called Codex Chakos, discovered in Egypt in the 1970s. Radiocarbon dating places this copy around 280 CE, with a margin of plus or minus 60 years. However, it is assumed to be a translation of an earlier Greek original from the 2nd century, written within the milieu of Gnostic Christians. Already in antiquity, the text was condemned as heretical. Church Father Irenaeus of Lyon mentioned it in 180 CE as one of the unorthodox writings. It then disappeared for nearly 1,700 years. After its discovery in Egypt, the badly damaged manuscript underwent extensive restoration and conservation. Only in 2006 did the National Geographic Society publish the first English translation, sparking a wave of discussion among historians, theologians, and the wider public. Today, the Gospel of Judas is regarded as an important source for studying the diversity of early Christian thought, particularly Gnosticism, while also serving as a challenge to reassess certain traditional interpretations of biblical figures. Regardless of its canonical status, it raises fundamental questions about guilt, loyalty, free will, and the role of betrayal in religious tradition. Gnosticism is a religious philosophical movement that developed mainly between the 2nd and 4th centuries CE in the Mediterranean region, especially in Egypt and Asia Minor. Its name comes from the Greek word gnosis, meaning knowledge. At its core, Gnosticism emphasized secret spiritual knowledge that would enable a person to free themselves from the material world and return to the divine source. Gnostic teaching was based on dualism, the division of existence into the spiritual and the material, where the material world was considered lower, imperfect, even a prison for the soul. In Gnostic cosmology, the highest God plays a central role, absolute, transcendent, and unknowable. This God exists beyond time and space and is the source of all light and goodness. Yet the highest God was not directly involved in the creation of the material world. Instead, creation was the work of a lower divine being called the demiurge. the demiurge was often seen as ignorant or even evil, the maker of the flawed material world who imprisoned human souls within it. In some Gnostic traditions, the demiurge was identified with the God of the Old Testament, whom Gnostics considered a lesser deity unaware of the supreme God. The spiritual realm, known as the pleroma, represents the domain of divine perfection, inhabited by spiritual entities called aeons. These aeons are emanations of the supreme God and form a complex hierarchy of beings radiating from the divine source. According to Gnosticism, humans are composed of body, soul, and a divine spark that originates from the pleroma. The task of humanity is, through secret knowledge, gnosis, to awaken this spark, free it from the prison of the material world, and return it to the pleroma. Salvation, therefore, does not lie in mere faith or rituals, but in profound spiritual knowledge that enables one to overcome the dualism of body and spirit and unite with the supreme God. Gnosticism developed in several currents, the most significant being Sethianism, which drew on myths surrounding the biblical figure Seth, and Valentinianism, founded by Valentinus, which emphasized love and unity of spirit. Among the most important Gnostic writings are those discovered in 1945 at Nag Hammadi in Egypt, such as the Gospel of Thomas, Pistis Sophia, and the Apocryphon of John. Overall, Gnosticism represents a complex, multi-layered spiritual system that sought to explain the origin of the world, the meaning of human existence, and the path to salvation through knowledge. Its cosmology rests on the belief that the material world is flawed, and that true reality and genuine happiness lie in the soul's return to divine light. According to the Bible, Judas Iscariot was one of the 12 apostles of Jesus Christ, one of his closest disciples. According to biblical sources, he likely came from a place called Kerioth, which explains his surname, Iscariot. He is best known for the betrayal of Jesus, one of the pivotal moments of the New Testament. Judas's betrayal consisted of handing Jesus over to the Roman soldiers and the chief priests for 30 pieces of silver. This transaction led to Jesus' arrest in the Garden of Gethsemane, where Judas identified him with a kiss, a secret sign for the soldiers to know whom to seize. According to the Gospels, for example, Matthew chapter 26, verses 14 to 16, and John chapter 13, verses 21 to 30, Judas arranged this betrayal with the leaders of the Jewish religious authorities and promised to deliver Jesus to them. As for Judas's motives, the Bible is rather unclear, and various passages of Scripture, as well as theological scholars, offer different interpretations. Some believe Judas was driven by greed and the desire for money. Others, however, view his act as a necessary part of God's plan of salvation, since without the betrayal, Jesus could not have been arrested, tried, and crucified, a sequence of events considered essential in Christian teaching for the forgiveness of humanity's sins. Some theories also suggest Judas may have been disillusioned with Jesus, expecting him to lead the Jewish nation to political freedom, which did not happen. Ultimately, Judas deeply regretted his act. According to Matthew chapter 27, verses 3 to 5, he tried to return the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and then committed suicide by hanging. In the Acts of the Apostles, however, there is a slightly different account, stating that Judas fell and his body burst open. Although the details differ, both versions agree that Judas died shortly after his betrayal. In Christian tradition, Judas is often regarded as a symbol of treachery, falsehood, and disappointment. His story serves as a warning against temptation, greed, and the betrayal of those close to us. At the same time, his role is also a reminder of the complexity of human motives and the inevitability of certain events that led to Jesus' redemption of the world. The Gospel of Judas consists of 17 chapters, offering a radically different perspective on Jesus, his disciples, and especially Judas Iscariot. Let us now examine the chapters one by one. The opening section presents the text as the secret words of Jesus spoken in conversation with Judas Iscariot during 8 days before the Passover. The text suggests it is a hidden, esoteric interpretation of Jesus' message, not intended for all disciples. In the second chapter of the Gospel of Judas, Jesus performs miracles and reveals great signs meant to bring salvation to humanity. He also begins disclosing secrets that transcend this world and speaks about events to occur at the end of times. Yet he often does not appear in his true form, but manifests as a child, possibly symbolizing innocence or hidden divine presence. In Judea, Jesus finds his disciples praying and giving thanks to God for bread. At this, he begins to laugh, which surprises them. When they ask him why, he replies that he is not laughing at them, but at the fact that their prayer is not guided by their own will, but serves only to glorify their God, suggesting they worship a different God than he himself. When the disciples insist that Jesus is the Son of their God, he tells them, "How do you know me? Truly I say to you, no generation of people among you will know me." This reflects the Gnostic view that the world was created by a lower deity, while the true higher God exists beyond this world. In the third chapter, the disciples react with indignation to Jesus' words and even begin to blaspheme. Jesus challenges them to let the one who is strong enough step forward and reveal the perfect human. None dares, except Judas Iscariot. Judas comes before Jesus, but does not dare to look him in the eyes. Judas then says, "I know who you are and where you have come from. You are from the immortal realm of Barbelo, and I am not worthy to utter the name of the one who has sent you." In this way, he shows that he understands Jesus' true nature, something the other disciples fail to see. In the Gnostic perspective, this gives Judas a unique position above the others. Jesus replies, "Step away from the others, and I will reveal to you the mysteries of the kingdom." In the fourth chapter, Jesus hints that Judas will be replaced so that the number of disciples remains 12. Judas asks about the coming of the great day of light, but Jesus does not answer and departs. The next morning, Jesus reappears before the disciples, and when they ask where he went, he tells them he visited another great and holy generation. When they seek more information, Jesus laughs and says that no mortal or angel can see this generation, for it does not belong to this world. This part emphasizes the Gnostic view of hidden spiritual knowledge and portrays Judas as the only disciple who truly understands Jesus' essence and his connection to the immortal realm. In the fifth chapter, the disciples describe a vision of a great house with an altar and 12 men whom they take to be priests. These priests receive offerings from a crowd of people waiting patiently. The disciples are troubled as they describe that some of these priests fast, others sacrifice their children or wives, some engage in homosexual relations, commit murders, and other sins, all while invoking the name of Jesus. In the sixth chapter of the Gospel of Judas, Jesus responds to the disciples' concerns about their vision of the temple and offers an allegorical interpretation. He explains that the priests they saw accepting sacrifices represent the disciples themselves. The animals brought for sacrifice symbolize the crowds of people whom they mislead. In this way, Jesus criticizes their leadership, telling them they serve a false god through empty rituals. He further labels these religious leaders as servants of error and warns that on the last day they will be put to shame. He urges the disciples to cease offering sacrifices and fighting against him, for each person has their own star and path. He stresses that true spiritual knowledge cannot be attained through empty rituals, but only through inner understanding and connection with God. This chapter reflects the Gnostic critique of traditional religious practices, viewed as false and ineffective for attaining true spiritual knowledge. Jesus' teaching in this gospel underscores the importance of inner enlightenment and personal communion with the divine, as opposed to external rituals and sacrifices. In the 7th chapter, Judas asks Jesus about the fate of human generations. Jesus replies that the souls of every human generation will die, but those who complete the time of the kingdom, though their spirit will leave them and their bodies will perish, their souls will live and be taken upward. Judas then asks, what will happen to the rest of humankind? Jesus answers that it is impossible to sow seed on a rock and reap its fruits, symbolizing that a corrupt generation, created by the hand that made mortal humans, cannot inherit the eternal realms. This is followed by a scene where Judas shares his vision. The 12 disciples were stoning and persecuting him. He also saw a great house surrounded by important people, with a leafy roof and a crowd inside, begging to be admitted. Jesus answers that Judas's star has led him astray, and that no mortal is worthy of entering that house, which is reserved for the holy. In the 8th chapter, Judas worries about what will become of him. He asks Jesus whether his soul, or what remains of him after death, will fall under the power of the dark forces that rule the world. Jesus tells him that he will reveal something important, but warns him that once Judas truly understands the truth, he will suffer greatly for it. He will see the spiritual kingdom and understand who belongs to it, and this knowledge will bring him pain. It becomes clear that Judas has a unique role unlike the others. He is not one of the ordinary 12 disciples. Jesus tells him he will be the 13th. This means he is set apart, exceptional. Because of this, people will condemn and curse him, yet he will possess power and understanding that the others lack. Even though misunderstood and rejected, he will remain close to God. In the 9th chapter, Jesus initiates Judas into cosmic mysteries that, according to him, no human has ever seen. He describes the existence of a vast and boundless spiritual world whose dimensions are unknown even to angels. In this invisible and eternal realm dwells the Great Spirit, an entity utterly beyond human or angelic comprehension, never seen or named. This spirit is absolute, transcendent, and beyond all categories of ordinary existence. From this realm appears a luminous cloud, and from it is born a great angel, the enlightened, divine self generated. This being comes forth through the will of the Great Spirit, and from his existence arise 4 other angels who become his servants. The self-generated then creates the world. From his words and will emerges the first radiant aeon, a heavenly power he rules, attended by countless angels. He then creates a light bearer, another spiritual luminary who also commands innumerable angelic helpers. In this way, further enlightened aeons are formed, each entrusted with authority and assigned hosts of angels to aid them. The 10th chapter presents Gnostic cosmology, centered on Adam and the spiritual beings known as aeons and light bearers. At the very summit of the invisible, incorruptible realm dwells Adamus, the spiritual archetype of all humanity. His presence cannot be seen by any of the angels. He belongs to the highest sphere from which all that is lower originates. From the image of Adamus comes the incorruptible generation of Seth, a pure spiritual lineage of humanity that carries the primordial divine spark. From this line emerge first 12 light bearers, then 24, and finally 72. Each of these 72 light bearers passes on its light further, creating 5 additional beings of light, bringing the total to 360. The same number is mirrored in the structure of the spiritual cosmos, 12 aeons, each with 6 heavens, making 72 heavens in total. Each heaven is further divided into 5 layers, producing 360 layers altogether. Each level has its own angels and so-called virgin spirits, who ceaselessly praise the Great Spirit and sustain the order of light. This vast hierarchy illustrates the Gnostic view of the cosmos. All existence flows from the single, supreme source and bears within it perfect geometry and clear order. By contrast, the material world is only a faint reflection. True fullness, the pleroma, remains above in the incorruptible worlds of light. In the 11th chapter of the Gospel of Judas, Jesus reveals to Judas the Gnostic conception of the origin of the world, chaos, and the underworld. The cosmos is described as a host of immortal beings, but the Father and the 72 light-bearers consider it a place of destruction rather than salvation. These beings exist alongside the self-generated and his 72 aeons, within which the first human endowed with incorruptible powers appeared. One of the aeons is El, associated with the cloud of knowledge and an angel. This aeon gave rise to 12 angels, tasked with ruling over chaos and the underworld. From this mystical cloud then emerged an angel with a fiery face stained with blood, named Nebro, meaning rebel, and corresponding to the Gnostic Yaldabaoth, often portrayed as a false god or lower creator. Alongside him appeared another angel named Saklas. Nebro and Saklas then created 6 more angels as their helpers, who in turn brought forth 12 angels in the heavens. Each was assigned a portion of heaven to govern. This narrative reflects the Gnostic conviction that the physical world was created by lower deities, responsible for its imperfection and suffering. True knowledge and salvation come only through inner enlightenment and union with the higher, true God, who transcends this material world. The 12th chapter describes the structure of spiritual beings who hold power over the underworld and chaos. The text lists 12 rulers and 12 angels, 5 of whom are named as possessing special authority over these lower realms of existence. Among these 5 is Seth, identified with Christ. In Gnostic traditions, Seth is often regarded as the forefather of spiritual humanity and the bearer of divine knowledge. The other 4 named are Harmathoth, Galilah, Yobel, and Adonaios. These beings are presented as rulers over the underworld and chaos, which in the Gnostic context represent the dark and imperfect aspects of creation. This structure of spiritual beings and their roles in the world's creation illustrates the idea that our world is not the work of the supreme God, but rather the product of lower beings whose dominion is incomplete or even harmful. The 13th chapter presents an alternative Gnostic view of the origin of humanity, one that differs from the traditional biblical account. In this text, the creator of Adam and Eve is identified as a lower divine being named Saklas, which translates as fool. Together with his angels, Saklas created the first human pair in his image and likeness, yet without the direct blessing of the supreme God. Eve is referred to in the text as Zoe, meaning life. This name reflects the Gnostic idea that Eve is the bearer of life and knowledge. In the Gnostic context, Zoe is often associated with divine wisdom, Sophia, and represents the aspect of divinity that brings life and consciousness into the human world. In the 14th chapter of the Gospel of Judas, Judas asks Jesus what will happen to Adam and the rest of humankind. Jesus explains that human souls were given to people by God through the archangel Michael, but only on loan, temporarily, so that they might serve. These people, however, are still subject to the powers that rule over them. On the other hand, Jesus speaks of a special group of people whom he calls the Great Generation. To these, spirits and souls are given by the Archangel Gabriel, not as a loan but permanently. These people are not subject to any ruler. They are free and spiritually independent. Here, Jesus distinguishes between 2 kinds of people: ordinary people who live under the dominion of spiritual powers and remain bound to the physical world, and the Great Generation, which has a direct connection to the higher divine reality. This reflects the Gnostic belief that true liberation of humanity does not come through religious authorities or external rituals, but through inner knowledge and awakening to spiritual truth. In the 15th chapter of the Gospel of Judas, Jesus speaks with Judas about the future of the wicked and the end of the world, which according to the Gnostic view is ruled by lower, false deities. These lower gods, also called archons, or rulers of chaos, created our world, but they are not the true God. Rather, they are forces that hold humanity in spiritual ignorance and deception. Jesus explains that God gave Adam and his descendants special knowledge so that they could resist these powers. Through this inner knowledge, gnosis, people can free themselves from their influence. Jesus also foretells that these dark powers, led by a being named Saklas, will have only a limited time. When their time ends, their first star will appear, which may symbolize the coming of their chosen one or a spiritual age. These people will complete their plan, but their deeds will be corrupt. They will devastate, commit evil, and even kill in the name of Jesus, twisting his message. This passage criticizes the religious misuse of Jesus' name and shows how even evil can masquerade as holiness when people lose true knowledge and connection with the real God. In the 16th chapter of the Gospel of Judas, Judas asks Jesus what will happen to those baptized in Jesus' name. Jesus replies that many of these people, who in reality worship Saklas, will turn away from true spiritual knowledge and be united with darkness and evil. Jesus also predicts that Judas will surpass the other disciples by sacrificing the man who clothes him. This figurative expression means that Judas's betrayal is not merely an act of treachery, but part of the divine plan that will allow Jesus' soul to be freed from the material body and its prison. In this way, Judas becomes a key figure in the spiritual process of liberation, a radically different perspective than most traditions which portray him as a traitor. Instead, he is seen as an important instrument of a higher divine purpose. Jesus also points Judas to his star, which guides him and urges him to lift his eyes and see the light and stars surrounding the shining cloud, a symbol of spiritual guidance and hope. The final chapter of the Gospel of Judas offers a different perspective on the events leading to Jesus' arrest and re-evaluates Judas' role in this story. Unlike the traditional Gospels, where Judas is portrayed as a traitor, here he is depicted as Jesus' confidant, acting on his instruction. In this version of the story, Judas fulfills Jesus' wish to help him break free from the physical body and return to the spiritual realm. Jesus shares with Judas the secrets of the universe and emphasizes his unique role in the divine plan. Judas's act is not seen as betrayal, but as a necessary step in fulfilling a higher purpose. The Gospel ends with Judas handing Jesus over to the chief priests in exchange for money, thus fulfilling his role in the divine plan. This conclusion suggests that Judas's act was not motivated by greed, but by obedience and an understanding of deeper spiritual truths. This alternative view of Judas's role has sparked debate among scholars and believers alike, as it challenges traditional interpretations and offers a new perspective on the events leading to Jesus' crucifixion. And that is all from the Gospel of Judas. What do you think about this mysterious and remarkable text? Share your thoughts with us in the comments.